Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. I'm here with Matt Pennie. Over the course of this month, June 2022, we are going to dive into scouting reports for 2022 NBA draft prospects. Every day or so, we're going to have a new video released breaking down a prospect, diving into what makes them such an interesting player here going forward into the NBA draft. Today, we're going to dive into Blake Wesley, a combo guard out of Notre Dame. As usual, the structure here is going to be that Matt Pennie gives us a bit of an overlook in terms of numbers, and then we're going to dive deep into the offense, the defense, just his overall outlook as a player, and maybe a couple of team fits that make sense. So, Matt, give us a start.
Blake Wesley, 6'4" with a 6'11" wingspan. That's a difference maker as a lead guard with those type of measurables. Averaged 14.4 points per game, 3.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists while shooting 40% from the field, 30% from three, 66% from the free throw line. He started 28 of 35 games as a true freshman for Notre Dame, which began during the first ACC conference game at Boston College. The highlights of the numbers: he had 24 points at Wake Forest, going 6 of 11 from three. He had 21 and 6 at Florida State and 22 and 7 at Georgia Tech.
Don't forget the big game winner against Kentucky
as
well, essentially.
Put him on the map.
For what it's worth, he was expected to come in with a 6'11" wingspan. Actually came in with a 6'9.25" wingspan at the combine. Came in a little bit shorter than expected, but ultimately you're drafting Blake Wesley because of what he can be as a scorer. He's a shot creator at the end of the day. I think that he really has an innate understanding of how to get to his shot, get to his spots, and to be able to just break down defenders. That's what makes him such an interesting player. It's just how much of all of this works right now is the significant question that I think NBA teams are going to ask.
The shot creation is definitely his best asset. He has that bursty first step where he beats his man and can get into the lane. He pushes the ball ahead. He can really extend on the break. And when he has space to operate, he shows off the athletic tools a lot more. He'll start pot on a dime for his pull-up. He limits it to 2 or 3 dribbles off the catch. And sort of this sneaky and streaky three-point shooter, too. I mean, the numbers, 30%, doesn't seem like a three-point shooter, but he's better than that. You're not necessarily viewed all the time as a threat, but he's capable to do it. We talked about he had 6 threes in a game this year. So when he has the confidence, can knock down a few more, his game starts flowing better too. The release on the shot is a little bit funky. He catches it, he pumps to the left. It doesn't always look natural, and the poor free throw numbers don't indicate it's going to improve significantly. I think I'm a little bit more of a believer than you may be there. I like him as the guy that attacks a shifting defense off a ball reversal more than kind of like the initial first attack. That's why I like him as a combo and off the ball more. And it's the same with his playmaking. When you watch the film, he's best when the offense isn't really set, when it's more scattered, and he can create off those scrambles and make moves and reads off of there. I want some of the finishing package to be better. He did have his problems NCAA tournament around the rim. It's turning those low jumps he does on the fast break with space into the same type of ones you do with a man's on your hip, and then finding that balance between speed and control and not being completely always revved up to 100, using the change of paces a little bit more within the flow of things, and just add some calm to his game when he catches the ball.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you're 100% right. He just needs that poise at the end of the day. I do think that he has an impressive array of counters for what the defense presents him with, right? Like he has a pretty nasty spin move. He has crossovers. He has a pretty gross hesitation. I think that's awesome. Gets his man on his hip, keeps him there. I think that's a really, really impressive part of his skill set. I am more worried about the jump shot right now, I think, than you are. As you said, he brings it all the way across his body. Like it almost starts on his left hip and then stays on his left hip. And then like whenever he's setting to shoot off the catch, like it feels like he's immediately catching and bringing it all the way over to his left hip and then like bringing it around his body in a really, not super functional way that's going to translate to him being able to knock down shots off of movement in any way. He's an okay pull-up shooter right now. I think that like maybe that's where I feel a little bit better about him because it just feels like it's not as loud of a jump shot, not as active of a jump shot. Uh, you mentioned the pull-up game just in terms of likes to get into the mid-range. I
Yeah,
think that his best shot is really that stop and pop, takes that hard dribble, stops and pops from the top of the key, from the right elbow, really likes to dribble right into that pull-up as opposed to left is what I saw. You mentioned the idea of you like him as a second side creator. I actually do kind of like him out of ball screens, to be
yeah.
honest. Like I think that his passing ability actually showcases best there. Had some really flashy passes this
Right.
year, I thought. Like wasn't consistently a great decision maker, and we'll talk about that in a second, but like I really, really like the fact that he's clearly reading the backside of the defense. He's clearly reading that help defender and can hit that corner kick out with either hand and get real velocity on the pass. And it tends to be pretty accurate. Like it's not, he's not the most accurate passer in the draft, but like he gets it there in a pretty real, with real speed, and he gets it there where it needs to be, at least relatively close to the shooter pocket. It wouldn't surprise me if he was a better passer in the NBA than he is in college, if only because it feels like his best moments came when there was a little bit more space for him to
Yeah.
operate. And I think that's a really, really important, aspect here, because if he can get downhill in the way that we saw at Notre Dame this year. Notre Dame set a lot of really, really high ball screens, like 40-foot away from the rim ball screens for him just to try and get him downhill. NBA teams will also do that. And I think that if he proves he can shoot and if he proves he can finish, you mentioned the finishing. I mean, disaster as a finisher. He shot 41% at the rim this year. He was terrible at it. Some flashy like inside hand finishes, but for the most part was just really, really bad at it. I thought if he shows that he can be efficient at all in terms of being a scorer, his game does kind of, fix itself pretty quickly.
He does. The reads too improved as the year went on. I think once he got his legs under him a little bit too. When you come in, you start as a freshman is one thing. To start in the ACC is like another. There's a lot to put on your shoulders, and
Mm-hmm.
he sort of became expected to deliver every single game. Where there was times, probably during the recruitment process, he thought it would be a multi-year thing at Notre Dame. It wasn't. It was expedited, and with the passing reads, as I mentioned, he got better with the rotating big stepping up and making a simple pass too. There can be some wild
Yeah.
ones too, but he got better in dropping off into the dunker spot, little bounce passes, reading the roll man off a pick and roll, and not trying to make like the highlight spectacular play every single time. Like he felt like he probably did that innate pressure built up within himself.
Yeah, and you mentioned the passing reads got better. I agree. I think that the shot selection got worse
Mm,
throughout the year, though. His overall decision making, I think, and his overall efficiency is what needs to improve. He had a sub 50 true shooting percentage with pretty close to an even assist to turnover ratio.
mm.
Offensively, this is a guy that's probably a negative to start his career. The key is going to be, can he develop that finishing craft? Can he develop the shooting ability to be able to get the most out of his athletic tools as a shot creator, which, as we've said at the top here, are pretty real. Defensively, I actually kind of liked him defensively. I
Really?
liked him more than I remembered because I think that he ended up taking on a lot of really tough assignments.
Yeah.
And I thought that he used his length pretty well on the defensive end in a way that I just didn't remember off the top of my head whenever I went back through the tape.
I felt a little differently. I see more as similar to the offense. It's a work in progress. When you talk about the wingspan, the athletic tools, just has to use them better or more
Yeah.
frequently. He almost has no bend when he's off the ball, so stands up upright, reaches
Yeah.
in instead of shuffling his feet when he has that first quick step. If he just did that instead of just bending over and trying to back tap. Then on closeouts, he'd have like good position, but he'd overcommit and get burnt. Like he's in the right place, but
Yeah.
it's like one step too far and he can recover, but you can make yourself a lot quicker if you just eliminate overstepping and overcommitting there. It was the same with like jumping screens. He'd go the wrong way and he could recover, but you save yourself a lot of energy if you don't do that to start. And even like some of the ball screen stuff, he would ice it like the wrong way and have to bounce back.
Yeah.
And then when the zone, Notre Dame went zone a lot, especially later in the year, he would just be at the top of the key and you could cover up team defensive deficiencies there too, and he could just get lazy without his arms up in the air. You have that wingspan, you have that ability, you have to use that while you're out there. So with his youth and just lack of reps too, I don't want to completely dismiss it, but he has some places to go to get there to be a reliable NBA defender too.
Yeah, what I liked were two things. I actually thought he did a pretty good job using his length on the ball just to disrupt at the point of attack. Like I thought he was actually okay at that. Uh, the other thing that I thought he does really well is that he actually just slides and cuts off ball handlers. And then because he's actually pretty strong through his chest and through his core, he has lower body strength that he needs to improve. But I actually felt that like if you tried to drive into his chest, it was hard to get through him. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was actually kind of difficult to like create a clear open look whenever he was on like the ball. And you mentioned the closeouts. I thought it was pretty bad. I thought that he contested shots with his long arms, but I think that he needs to do a bit of a better job just staying solid on those closeouts. In terms of ball screens, I didn't think he was always a second effort guy. I thought that, he would die on the vine a little bit too easily, which is a concern. But overall, like I thought he has a chance to be a net neutral defender. Like I think he's probably going to be okay on that end, given like that you're drafting him for offense, not defense.
And you're drafting him for time too. There's a guy who declared as a freshman your hope that if he went back to school, he makes that sophomore jump when all
Yeah.
of a sudden he's talked about as a top 7 to 10 pick. You take him now, late lottery, end of the first, somewhere in that range, right? And you get that bargain of knowing his best basketball is ahead of him, but still was able to produce in the ACC when he had the opportunity this past season.
Yeah, for me, Wesley is a guy that I would take in the 20s. I wouldn't take him in the teens. I don't love the upside quite enough. I was surprised. I think I do like him a little bit more than a Bryce McGowan's. Wesley will probably be in the 20 to 25 range on my board at the end of the day. I just worry a little bit about I don't love the jumper and I don't love the finishing. And this is a guy that we're valuing as a shot creator. I was talking to Adam Spinella a couple days ago, and he brought up this idea of he's comfortable if it's just one thing that he can fix to be an effective NBA player. And at the end of the day, I think if Wesley fixes the jumper, he probably is an effective NBA player. I think I'm just a little bit lower on the jumper than you are, and he kind of has to fix a lot, it feels like, to be effective, even though the shot creation ability does give him a high enough upside to where I am willing to bet on him in the first round.
It's tweaks, it's minor tweaks here and there. I don't think it's a complete rehaul defensively. I don't think it's a complete rehaul offensively. It's honing in some of the bad habits. The jumper, that's just something when you get in the right developmental system, they can hack off the pump to the side and bring it up. It'll just be more of a fluid motion there. I have him
Yeah.
18th on my board. It's shot creation. We're in a shot creation league. You bet on the youth and experience and the good things he did, and hoping a year, 2 years, by the end of that contract, it really starts to pay off for you and your franchise.
Are there any teams that stand out to you?
Ooh, you put me on the spot there. I have him in like that late teen range. I have to pull up the board to say like who is there that would ultimately fit. My short answer is someone that doesn't need him to produce from day one. If you're drafting
Yep.
him thinking that he needs to average 9 points per game as a rookie and give you 26 minutes, that's not it. I'd want to be a team that can bring him along slowly, maybe an understudy for a veteran guard in that position, and groom him along throughout the way.
Yeah, like Milwaukee stands out. Milwaukee is so good right now that it's very unlikely for a rookie to just immediately step into that rotation. I think Milwaukee would do well with him developmentally. They draft these guys with long arms pretty regularly. Denver is a team that I think actually does need some help in the backcourt, so he could be forced into playing a little bit too early. But if Jamal Murray is back, they could bring him along a bit more slowly, which could be beneficial for him. Memphis is just phenomenal. Draft landing spot for anyone, I think, developmentally. So if he could end up in Memphis, that would be great. Those are the teams, we're talking 21, 22, 24. Those are the teams that really stand out for me, though, as draft fits. But keep it locked here. We'll have more of these coming soon. That's been Matt Pennie. I'm Sam Vecenie. This has been the Game Theory Podcast over on YouTube.